Hope for all of you there. This isn't a motivational speech, sorry. But I have a funny story about how I met Joe for the first time. I'm here in Atlanta. I'm getting my career restarted, and things are kind of going well. Mark Climby is in the house. Where's Mark Climby? Mark, where are you? So if you ever hear a story about, hey, this guy Mark, he gave me a camera. I was working at Kinko's, and he gave me a camera, and he set me loose at a wedding, and I quit my job the next week. That's Mark Climby back there. So Mark gives me a camera, sets me loose at a wedding. I'm getting a couple years now under my belt, and I open up a studio on the west side, and I'm feeling pretty established, and I get this call one day. And this phone call is, hi, my name's Lynn. I'm a producer in Connecticut. And I'm like, wow, what's up? It's like Mark Adams in the house, right here. All right. Mark Adams gave me your name. I'm like, all right, big in the world. All right, this is good. We're looking for an assistant in Atlanta. And I'm like, Mark Adams, that son of a bitch. I mean, there's a certain amount of pride. Like, I assisted for 4 years, and there's this pride when, I got my own 2 C-stands of my own that I'm still carrying myself, but I'm a photographer, damn it. I'm not an assistant. And here's some lady calling me from Connecticut. Mark Adams gave my name.
I knew it would lead to something good.
Yeah, right? It changed my life in many ways. So Lynn starts talking, and I'm like, Lynn, hey, I'm sorry to stop you. I'm getting all diplomatic now, and my pride, my ego is flaring up. I hate to stop you, but I'm a full-time photographer here in Atlanta. Let me, I'm not assisting any longer. Let me help you find an assistant. Tell me what you need. Well, Joe McNally's coming to town, and he's doing 2 portraits for Sports Illustrated. National Geo Joe? Yeah. Lit a hanger with speed lights, Joe? Yeah. Yeah, when do you need him? Well, it's next Tuesday or whatever, and I'm clearing schedules. The hell with whatever I got going on. Yes, I will be there. And I'm second assisting Joe McNally, not even first assisting. I'm going to be the second assistant. So I take the job. I tell him, yeah, where do I need to be? I got some nasty call time of some stupid 7:30 in the morning at Georgia Tech, and here comes this Yukon pulls up with Joe and Brad Moore in it, and the back opens up, and I'm like, dear God. You have a lot of equipment. You pack a lot of equipment, Joe. From what I hear. So, back at Yukon opens up. I meet Joe. Hi, Joe. We're packing all this stuff out. And I'm sitting there. I'm just like lightware cases. And I'm sitting there going, he's got more in lightware cases than I got in gear. And so we're packing all this stuff, and you actually ran out of light stands. And I had to go to my studio, and he rented light stands for me because he was out of light stands. We're setting this stuff up in the gymnasium, and it was an amazing day. It was just an absolutely amazing day to just watch Joe work, to watch how he worked with, his subjects. They had that big, remember that big blackboard? Yeah, the guys came in and did all the, math on it and stuff. It was great. He was not a basketball player at Georgia Tech, so, they kind of have to be half smart at least. So it was an amazing day, and getting to meet Joe, and then just realizing that he's just a dude, he's a guy that gets out there and just is doing it. Well, your assistant was Brad Moore.
Right.
Brad went on to work with Kelby.
I lost him in a card game.
Yeah. And then Brad calls me to 2 years ago saying, hey, I'm Brad Moore. We worked in Atlanta together. Oh, yeah, I remember you. And it's well, you need this guest blog spot on guest blog post on Kelby.com. You want to do something? I don't know. I was going through a really tough time in my life at that point, and I didn't know if I'm banging my head against this wall. I'm trying to make it happen. I'm trying to do it. It's just I'm barely hanging on to it. And I did this little video called Transform, just this black and white video. It was a risk for me to make, and I put it out there, and it changed my life. And it goes back to Brad Moore, which goes back to you, which goes back to Mark Adams, which goes with K, which goes back to Mark with C, climbing. and so, like, really, other than Brad being here, I mean, really, like, interesting key figures of my life are here tonight. Brad couldn't be here. Yeah, sorry, he's working with Kelby. He's washing the car. Plurals. No, but Joe, thank you for being here. And so I'll lead you off. I've been at this 15 years. How long have you been at this?
35.
35. So I was just getting out of diapers when you were just and that's an important thing to think about. Right? I mean, I look at Joe, and I looked at his lightware cases and all his gear, and I was like, I want that. And I got to realize this takes time. You know, so I'm at this point where I feel like at 15 years, I'm just coming into my skin. I'm just figuring out who the hell I am as a photographer. So my question to you to kind of lead off tonight, and what I want is like Joe, I just want you to see Joe and just talk. And then if we can take questions and stuff like that, then we can do that. But I'm getting to this point where I'm just feeling like I'm coming into my spot. And where I'd like you to go is maybe to start off is, where were you when you were just figuring it out? At what point where you're like, okay, I'm kind of getting this figured out? And then what's that journey today? Like? Yeah, right. That's my man. All right, Joe McNally, everyone.
I mean, really, you know, thank Zach, thank everybody for coming. I mean, photographers can't resist that, right? Put beer together with talking about pictures. You know. So yeah, it's an honor to be here, to be asked, and love being in Atlanta. I've shot here a lot, you know, over the course of the years. It's a pretty cool place, and the photo scene here has always been really, really a cool one and a good one. And I have lots of colleagues here. Mark Adams shot my wedding, you know, and he worked with me when we did the first all-digital story for the National Geographic on the history of aviation. We were out at Lockheed Marietta, and that was a very typically ridiculous National Geographic job because we had we weren't allowed to go in to start working until midnight because they couldn't. We were shooting the F-22 Raptor, and there was only 5 of them flying, and they didn't want to stop the assembly line because each of the planes were $1.7 billion. I was like, so what's your problem? And, you know, so we had to work from midnight to 8 every day, you know, and get off of the line actually even before that, and work that out. But what Zach is saying, I think, is very true. I think, you know, as a photographer, I oftentimes think you're like this ship that just accumulates barnacles as you keep going, you know, and there's like this patina that, you know, rust and all that sort of stuff, and it's all good stuff because whatever happens to you informs your next step, and that is just the process, just like any occupation. But I think I have to think, maybe I'm partial, I have to think it's more emotional for a photographer because making pictures and extending yourself in this way is inherently a risk. So when you put yourself out there, it intertwines so many things. It intertwines your emotions, your thoughts, your head, your heart, your ego, your sympathy for the human condition, your position in the world, all of that stuff, all your perspective, everything that comes into play when at the moment you click that shutter, and then you take that thing and launch it into the world, and then anybody can say anything they want about it. It's an inherently risky, high-wire proposition, and I've been kind of working without a net for a long time. You know, I've been a staff photographer a couple of occasions. I had a job a long time ago that I was fired from, and then I got fired from my last staff job at Life magazine, you know, for reasons that wouldn't be discussed publicly. At the end of the day, what I've always found photographically, no matter who you're working for, at the end of the day, you're working for yourself, and at the end of the day, you have to be happy in and of that which you do. You have to love the act of being a photographer, because everything else is either going to really be great on that particular day, or it's really going to suck. And it sucks more than it's great. So you have to be happy at that moment of exposure. And I don't mean a good picture. I mean even a mundane picture. You have to be happy with the sound of that shutter closing. I'm still in love with the sound of the shutter. I'm still in love with looking through a lens and seeing that which I come for, you know. Thanks, I just need a moment now. That was really good, babe. What was Zach saying?
Sorry, derailed. Back on topic.
Is there any straight scotch beyond the wine? But what Zach is saying is very true, and I'm sure all of you feel it. I'm nothing, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I mean, and you could say, oh, this is being self-deprecating or anything. I've got a pretty good eye. I'll say that. I've got an ego about doing this. I'm pretty good at what I do. But I'm just another guy with a camera. And if I have anything on anybody else in the room, it's just that I've been in the trenches maybe longer than anybody else in the room. Okay? And I'm still kicking it. I'm 58 years old. Okay? And my last job for the Geographic, almost every morning, I would just about throw up. Drew was with me. Because I had to step on the skids of a helicopter and clip myself to the side of the helicopter and fly into high voltage towers, because that's where the pictures were. And I'm no athlete or spring chicken anymore, you know. And every morning I would just say to myself, "This is really stupid, dude, because you're going up with these guys, these linemen who eat steel for breakfast, and I could be their grandfather just about." But there's still a motivational aspect to this that I can't let go of. Someone once asked me what photography is in my life, and I said, well, if you consider your life an emotional kind of fabric, photography is the stitching. If I didn't have photography, I might come unraveled. I said that about maybe 10 years ago. I started to think that, but actually that's been replaced. And it's been replaced by my wife, Annie, because I'm really sincerely happy in the last 10 years of my life, for the first time in my life. And a lot of early kind of comings and goings, photographically speaking, whether they were good or not, a lot of that was fueled by desperation and a basic underlying unhappiness. So I'm not going to get mystical about all of this, but there is this sort of, it's like you slide into your own skin after a while, and you feel comfortable with who you are and what you can do. It's ironical, get used to this, it's ironical, I'm at my age, I'm better at this than I've ever been. Like I can knock it back, I can walk in and knock it back. Most art directors at lots of clients won't even see me. Guess what? They won't. Because I'm yesterday's news. I've been around the block, for 35 years. They're not necessarily looking for me anymore. I'm lucky in that I have a few stalwart commercial clients, people who return to me every year. I've got 2 stories cooking for the National Geographic. Why, I don't know. They keep coming back because I have pissed them off so bad in my career. They like to be taken seriously. I don't take them seriously. I don't take myself seriously. I take what we do very seriously. But I don't take all the trappings and all the other shit seriously at all. So this is a long-winded way of getting around to saying it's a process, and I feel comfortable now, and I feel comfortable talking on any level that anybody wants to talk about tonight. We can talk about clients or We can talk about philosophy. We can talk about pricing. We can talk about staying alive. We can talk about anything at all. And I'll offer you up what I think. And that's it. That's the compartment it's in. It's just what I think. And it's not necessarily valid. You know, maybe it might be valid now. It might not be valid next year. Look at how fast things are changing. You know, really wild. But I started in New York in 1976 as a copy boy at the New York Daily News. And I was taking home $109 a week, which even then in New York City was not a lot of money. I was getting nickel tips from people who were sending me for coffee. It's a real good sort of breakdown to everything. That's why you have to keep your head small and your feet on the ground in this, because this thing can turn on you like an animal. Ever hear that expression? Don't turn your back on the ocean. You know, that's what this field is like. Don't even take your eye off it for a minute, because it will freaking swallow you if you're not careful. And coming out of press photography in New York, it did kind of things accrued. You know, certain sense of maybe street smarts, certain sense of moving fast, certain sense of survival. You know, because the news fired my ass 3 years into things, and I had to go figure out how to make a living, you know, out in New York City. And so I jumped in and started doing it. And I've done some really undignified, stupid things. I used to go to Studio 54. Is anybody old enough to remember Studio 54? I chased, you know, Margaret Trudeau and Halston down the block. You know, I was unabashed. Why? Because if I got that picture and turned it in a UPI desk that night, I would get $50. You know, rates haven't changed much, right? So all of that stuff just accumulates and accrues, and then you finally become who you are as a photographer. And there's a confidence level. What I tell young photographers is that this business is 90% confidence. 10% other stuff, technical skill and all that sort of stuff, and certainly your eye comes into play, but it's so much about confidence, and you don't accumulate that for a while. And even now, still, I'm terrified. You know, I've been on jobs for the Geographic where I haven't found a picture for weeks at a time. I'll wake up in the morning and I'll just sit there on the side of the bed, and I've been someplace for 4 weeks, I haven't been home, and I'll just start crying. And I'm not looking for sympathy, it just is what it is, because you are emotionally bound up in this. You know, whether it's a wedding, whether it's an event, whether it's a story, whether it's a portrait or a commission, we are very eager to please, right? Photographers, we're like children. We go out there with our scribbling and come back and like, look what I did. We seek that approval almost desperately, which makes us kind of tough to be around sometimes, because we can be very needy. You know, it's tough on our spouses, tough on our overall family life. Throw kids into the mix. That's also an interesting equation to balance. I lost the balance many times. You know, my first marriage lasted 20 years, and we decided to part company. My ex-wife is the director of photography of the New York Times, so you would have thought that might have worked out. I don't work for the Times, oddly enough. It's not a client. So as far as I'm concerned, we can just mingle and talk, you know, and that's a kind of a long-winded introduction. I apologize for that, but it is, you know, if you're feeling like, you know, like you're at the edge of the cliff, a lot of times, like this kind of thing, like how do I go forward now? You get used to it, you know, because it'll be with you. But it's also a beautiful feeling because it keeps you sharp. It keeps you smart, keeps you sharp. And I'm still learning stuff.
So you're saying it never gets better?
You know, there's a difference between, you know, if you enjoy terror, you know.
So we're living stepping right to the edge all the time?
I have a friend who says about the field, he says it's a field where you have to make uncertainty your friend, which is part of what Zach's referring to as being comfortable in your own skin. Knowing that you're going to make it. Knowing that this day you might fail, but tomorrow you'll succeed. You know? So does anybody want to get us out of the gate with anything at all here? Instead of me just yakking? Yes, sir.
You said you're still learning stuff. What's the latest thing you've learned?
Oh, right. You know, I've been experimenting with light, and I've been you know, taking you know, different little Phillips little things, you know, that, you know, little attachments and stuff like that, and trying to combine things. So that's kind of a practical thing that I do all the time. Is I try to, you know, break loose with something if I can, and try to do something a little bit different. What I'm one of the things that I'm desperate to learn more about is the computer, and that aftermath process, which I'm kind of like, man, that's a mountain for me to climb. I'm kind of determined on that level, so that's a bit of fuel for the fire. I keep the studio alive, by working and finding new clients, or finding, I'm on the phone thinking ideas. I just gave in 3 proposals to folks at PPE. They're major proposals for next year, and so that's, I find that more and more. Does everybody in the room know David Hobby?
Yes.
Yeah.
And David's really onto something, I think, and he's kind of referring to it generally as controlling your own ecosystem as a photographer. And that's an interesting notion, because we've always been on our own. Look forward to increasingly being on our own. The days of big staffs and people supporting large photographic efforts is basically over. National Geographic has no staff anymore. There's one staff photographer left, Mark Thiessen, but he has that job mostly because he's funded from the corporate side, and so he has to do all the headshots and the business stuff and all that sort of stuff, in addition to doing some shooting for management. So I know even more that I'm on my own, and I'm going to have to forge any really worthwhile photography I really am committed to from now on. I'm probably going to have to fund on my own. So I have to learn how to navigate that path. So I'm kind of in the midst of that. Good and tough question. Again, just referring to the conversation we had earlier, I do suggest to people that digital is a wonderful thing, right? But it's also very isolating. This has always been kind of an isolating business, and digital has made it even more so. So I urge people to seek local communities. Right here tonight, what's happening tonight, okay? Talking about photography, sharing work, criticizing each other, gently but harshly at the same time, again, pushing each other, because there's no one else out there doing it right now, okay? Yeah, you can get all the information in the world on the web, and you can factor, Channel 1 Group A and it's F4 and all that sort of stuff. All that technical stuff can happen very easily. There's such a constant stream of information. But the real heart and soul and guts of your work, that's hard to do. One thing that I would do is pull together a solid portfolio of your best work, your 15, 20 best pictures. Far too often I see portfolios where somebody plunks down 85 pictures in front of me. And I look at him and say, dude, I've been doing this 35 years. I haven't shot 85 good pictures in my entire life. Think about it. Think about when you see a show from one of the truly great photographers, like an Eisenstadt or Gordon Parks or somebody like that. Why do you see the same 25, 30 core pictures? That's their best work, and that's a lifetime of a great photographer. So good pictures are hard to find. So when somebody plunks down 80, 100, 150 photographs and say, this is what I've been doing lately, I'm like, dude, first thing you do is pre-edit this with impact. You show your best 15, 20 pictures, and then if you have an inkling about a direction, say there's a local wedding photographer you admire, call him. Say that the photo editor at the AJC, call him. Call him. It's an audacious business, and it doesn't necessarily always reward you like that, but you have to seek that. You have to be kind of a little bit pushy to kind of get inside somebody's fence and say, I really am seeking out what you think of my work. When I was a copy boy at the Daily News, I got a cheap ticket to LA, and I went out, and the art director of the Daily News Sunday magazine, he gave me 3 phone numbers. Con Keyes, who was the director of photography of the LA Times, Douglas Kirkland, anybody know that name? Did all the Maryland work, and Paul Fusco, who was a magnet photographer whose work I really, really liked. Fusco was up in San Francisco. And so one day I saw Kirkland, and Douglas was always a gentleman. He was like, oh, you're a fabulous photographer. This is great. This is great. Douglas was just so nice, he couldn't say anything bad about anybody. Then I went to Con Keyes, and Con Keyes looked at me and says, you're not going to make it. So I went and I sat on a rocky outcropping on the Pacific Coast Highway for a while, and kind of like this is the Pacific Ocean. And then I went up to San Francisco, and I called Paul Fusco at home. And I said, Mr. Fusco, I really admire your work. I'd like to come and see you. He was like, okay. And I went out there. He had a beautiful home in Mill Valley, and he showed me, and he made 2 stacks out of my work, and he said, this is going in a good direction. This stuff you need to leave behind. This is where you have to work. This is where's weak. This is what's strong. This is what you have to do. Push in this direction. And that was like really, that was door opening, you know. So you have to seek out mentors. You have to seek people out, and it's a hectic thing to do because everybody's pressurized. But if I had even an inkling that I wanted to do newspaper work, I wouldn't hesitate for a minute to call the photo desk at the AJC and just say, hey, you know, can I come in? I'd really like to show somebody my work. You know, be prepared for disappointment, but at the same time also be prepared on your end to have your best work ready to go. Go in with your guns loaded. Okay? Don't go in with a portfolio, if it's a print portfolio, for instance. Don't go in with a portfolio that's one vertical, one horizontal, and then the horizontal is the other way, the next page, and stuff like that. Be seamless. People don't want to waste time. If you've got a website or something you know, that's going to be on an iPad or something like that, make it seamless. Make it user-friendly, because these folks want to go like this. They want to go. They want to move. Okay? Make it short, sharp, and sweet. Mark Adams. You've been involved in one of the most successful wedding businesses ever. I mean, a big-time wedding business. What about you? Who'd you show your work to when you started?
Forget everybody that would give me the opportunity. I mean, you're right. It takes just mad persistence to just hammer at it. Because, gosh, I mean, you know, every conference I could go to, every gathering I could go to, anybody who liked photography, and actually with my wedding photography business, one of the things we did early on, we made a list of like, these are like the top 15 wedding coordinators that I want to get to know. This is a list of the top 15 locations, venues that I want to shoot at. This is the, you know, cake makers, all that, and just started going through. Some of it was cold calls, someone was trying to find somebody who knew that person to introduce me, but it was that just crazy persistence to, you know, and sometimes you seem like a nut, but I mean, when I came to work with you, Joe, I mean, it was kind of lucky, but then my friend Alicia was the first assistant, and came to Atlanta, and she called around to find somebody else to be a second assistant, kind of like Zach. I was like, yeah, I'll come do this, and then it was such a great experience. I found myself up in New York, and I was like, Joe, let me come work for you for free for a couple of months, just to, like, what can I do to help you? Sweep your studio, load your batteries, you know, anything. But you know, that's one of the most valuable, you know, experiences I've had in my life in terms of learning stuff. And you know, so many people get wrapped up, I think, with, you know, what can I, you know, what can I get from this person? What can they teach me, or how much money can I get from this? Instead, I think I really, you know, learned the most when I've tried to say, what can I go give to somebody else, and how can I help them? I know it'll come back to me, but you know, I find that you can make your best connections if you can offer something to other folks, and that's how it worked with making connections with wedding coordinators and cake makers and other photographers and things like that. So I don't know. If that makes sense.
I think what you heard from Zach and what you're hearing consistently is persistence, tenacity. You know, this is a very, I mean, you hear it all the time. You hear, you know, photographers like in you know, American Photo and stuff like that. You know, this overarching brilliance, and now they blaze through a career as a still photographer, and they're shooting, you know, videos for some top rock band, and you know, I'm just like, you know, what the best thing you can have about this business is a sense of tenacity and loving it so much you won't let go of it. You know, I've had assistants over the years, not so much anymore, you know, but there was a period of time where, you know, people would come and interview and they would say, well, yeah, I'd really like to do some still photography, but, you know, I write poetry, and, you know, I've got a script that's in Hollywood right now, and the beginnings of a novel that seems to be well received, and, you know, I was talking to, you know, my counselor and my color therapist the other day, and I just, you know, I just want to reach across the table and go, you want to be good at this? It's all you can do. Unless you're much more brilliant than anybody I know, okay? If you want to be good at this, it's all you can do. You got to be totally invested. Fun, huh? This is great. Let's hit the bar.
So, any other questions for Joe?
Oh, millions. But
Yeah.
I don't have time.
You know, one thing you said, Joe, was like your wife and how you're finally meeting happiness and getting that. I'm getting that. My wife is somewhere. My wife. Where's Meg? Meg's over there.
Well,
She's coming.
Oh,
She's working, Zach. She's working.
Oh, right. Yeah.
What do you mean?
I just talking about how happiness and then having that person there, like you were just saying, you know, in the last 10 years, and that transcends photography.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's beyond photography, beyond cameras and all of that. And for me, that's Meg over here. In the spotlight. Wow, you
Literally right in the spotlight.
Like I put gaff tape on the floor. And all right. This is Meg. She's over here. None of this happens without her at all. And you're kind of at that point. But we've blown through marriages too. My first reading of your work is the moment it clicks when you talked about your relationship with your daughter and how you're going off to shoot pictures and you're doing your thing and it's how you supported your family and all of that. And she didn't know, well, Daddy's gone to shoot National Geographic, Daddy's gone to do this thing. All she knew was Daddy's gone. And when I read that, I'm sitting in a Barnes & Noble down here on Moreland, Edgewood, Quarters, whatever it is. And I'm just like, okay, tears, like fountain, like, oh my God, you know. Because my kids know that about me right now in my life. I don't know what Dad's doing. Dad's gone. You know, and that balance, people ask me all, how do you find the balance? Hard to do. I don't know. And some days we get it. A lot of days we don't. The number one word I've ever taken away from Joe McNally is tenacious, tenacity, but we know what kind of a cost that it comes to. I mean, it's just plastic and metal. That's all it is. That's it. That's it. It's pretty stupid. But we lay so much on the line, and we've had colleagues that lay their lives on the line for it, and we have colleagues that go to jail for it. We have colleagues that lose relationships for it, and it's tough. And the thing I'm trying to do is to realize my priorities. And I mean, I guess you're kind of coming into that place too. I mean, to have your priorities and your relationship with Annie, and how often does photography rub against that? Like how much is photography calling you out of that priority?
Yeah, very much so. So, I mean, how many folks travel here as shooters?
1, 2, 3.
Or just the hours. I mean, you know, photography is what, kind of 24/7, isn't it? There's always something to do. There's always something you can find to do. So yeah, it does bump up against your personal life in pretty severe ways. I'm blessed in the sense that my wife is in the business. Annie works for Nikon. Okay, so.
How convenient. I'm glad we're not videotaping.
Let me make one thing perfectly clear. No, Annie's amazing. She's incredibly knowledgeable. She's got a great eye. She teaches really well, and that's where we see our future together. Which is, you know, one of the things that I'm sliding more and more towards teaching, and because I enjoy it, and I don't know how much longer. Face that. You know, it's a very fragile business. You know, not only the pitfalls for you out there economically and business-wise, but also physically. You know, you snap an ankle, you bust a shoulder, whatever it could be. You know, So we see ourselves in that future, but if I could just be clear for just a minute, I actually, some folks look at me at my workshop and say, oh, that must be great for you. You're married to somebody at Nikon, get all those lenses for free and stuff like that. And I always say, it is really great being married to Annie because she's an absolutely wonderful woman, and it has absolutely nothing to do with working for Nikon because I buy all my stuff from Jeff Snyder at that round. And it's a weird world, right? Because I get a better price from Jeff than I can with Annie's Nikon employee discount. And the Nikon employee discount would take us like 4 months of paperwork. And I can't wait like that. So I just keep the decks clear between me and Nikon. Every Nikon camera, every lens I own, I bought. End of story. I just keep the decks clear. What they quote unquote give me are flashes because they know I teach with them. But they are not mine to keep. They're consigned. I have to turn them back in at the end of the year. And occasionally they look at me at the end of the year and say, you might as well keep this shit.
Water's pouring out of it.
Sand and stuff, you know. So sometimes they just write off some flashes and say, for whatever good it does you do, keep them, because we can't take them back. That is the extent of that relationship. There is kind of a bit of a myth out there that, you know, if you're kind of a quote-unquote Nikon shooter, you just get stuff for free, and that they don't give, to my knowledge, they don't give stuff to anybody. Now, I've done assignments for Nikon. They have paid me. I'm not on the Nikon payroll, but they have paid me to do assignments, and I'm very clear about that. It's totally cool with me. When I'm paid to do a Nikon job, I try to make them look good. That's what they pay you for. Make some good pictures, make stuff look good. But Henny and I are you know, we chuckle about it sometimes, that whole Nikon relationship, you know, and it gets a little too familiar almost, because earlier today I got a call from the Nikon area code, and I just figure it's my friend Mike Corrado, with whom I had a 30-year relationship, and so I just answer my cell phone and I just go, where the fuck are you? It was Annie's boss. Bill, hey! Yeah, no, I'm on it. Yeah. Oh, shit. Smart. They're not smart. Yeah, I mean, we see the future as being together more and more. We taught a fair amount this year together. We travel together. We're going to travel again before the end of the year together, and we see our doing that more and more. You know, just to stay together. You know, because it is hard. It is hard saying goodbye.
Yeah.
I mean, the toughest stretch we ever had was early this year. I mean, Nikon, she went to Vancouver Olympics for Nikon, and Nikon had a corporate mandate that spouses could not visit. So because they were living in like these compound, you know, like this corporate housing sort of thing. Is the spouses
just parties?
No. And then I was gone when she left, and I was gone when she came home, so we went for 6 weeks without seeing each other.
Yeah. And I saw Joe at Photoshop World, where you were near the end of that, and he was going crazy. He was just going crazy, and every time I wanted to talk to you, you were just kind of distracted, and you were on the phone with her. That's when Marshall passed away, and she was close to Jim Marshall, any music photographers in the house, and you were at your most wit's end I've ever seen you, and you were just like, I just need to get home. I just want to get home. I just want to go home. And you were about to jump out of there and off to like the Mideast or somewhere. Like you were just, it's tough. And if there's any last story I've heard from you, and I'll only ask you this because I've heard you stand in front of a room of 600 something people and talk about it, was I know I look at you and I go, oh, wow, there he is, way up there. Wow, you know, like you got your shit together, you're doing it all right.
I'm sure you comment on this anyway.
Yeah, right? You know, like it's this paved path. Like I remember coming out of school, I'd see Seliger's work. I could tell you what size softbox he probably used, but I couldn't tell you how he got the Kodak. I couldn't tell you how he got there. And I pictured him just as this, like, he's floating on clouds. And we can easily, as a group, how many of you look at Joe McNally and go, dude, that dude's on a cloud, like floating, like I'm this guy down here on the ground, and I'm struggling. I got my bills. I'm in debt. My life is shit. And I'm looking up, and I see Joe McNally, and he's 35 years into it. But you shared a story at Photoshop World I didn't know about. You mentioned tonight that we're near 10 years at the 9/11 anniversary, and we take you back to 2002. And where were you just 9 years ago or 10 years ago? I mean, where were you in life? You're not going to sit here, old man. I will. See how tenacious he is?
I mean, it brings up an interesting point. Zach has been through the mill, as you've indicated. We all have been, right? We all have been. And you have to embrace that, I think, as part of the process, because it informs your photography. You know, I think anybody who has a life of unparalleled ease, I don't know, do they become good photographers?
No.
Maybe. I don't know. But
I can name names.
You know,
They don't.
Let's have a couple of drinks and start naming names.
Oh, give me one more beer and I'll turn your video cameras off.
You know, 9/11 happened, and my business was pretty much at a stall. National Geographic had frozen me out. I hadn't worked for them for a couple of years because my previous story for them had got $100,000 over budget. They're pissed. Go figure. You know? They didn't really ask me why it had gone over budget, but it did, and I had lost a handle on it. I had done some really stupid stuff, but I also had a really powerfully adverse set of situations that occurred in the field. It was a story called The Power of Light, and you would have thought I had a kinship with that story. It turned out to be the most ridiculously difficult story I ever did. When you go to some place and you're supposed to photograph a people or a place, they at least are always there. You go to photograph a quality of light. You know? I went to see the Northern Lights like 2 or 3 times. I can't even remember now. Never saw them. You know, had to climb the Empire State Building 4 times. You know, flew on Stonehenge 3 times. We were budgeted for once. You know, I mean, stuff like that happens. So anyway, I lost that client. Sports Illustrated had gone kind of down the tubes for me. I did a big project for them for the Sydney Olympics, but then, you know, everything was kind of grinding to a halt. And then 9/11 occurred, and everything stopped, if you recall. You know, and it's just gone. Business just, you know. And we were in debt, and we had no assignments and nothing to do. And in the aftermath of 9/11, I had, in fact, it was the Thursday or Friday, I had tickets to a Lucy Kaplansky concert, folk singer down in Greenwich Village. And I had worked on the giant Polaroid camera once before for National Geographic, and I knew the people who ran it. So I said, look, you know, I'm tired of being sad right now. Let's go listen to some music. And I called up the people who ran the camera. And we went down and we listened to some music, and we were just talking. And I said, what do you think about this camera? Do you think it could be used for a project? And in my head, I just described it right then and there. And they said, yeah. And
by giant, we mean
20 by 20.
no, beyond that.
Bigger than that?
It's the Moby C camera. It used to be called Moby C. Some people call it the 40 by 80. If you took ceilings back here, if you took a wall from that wall to almost the windows, from about the doorway here to the windows, that's the inside of the camera.
Wow.
The lens is an 80-pound piece of glass stuck in the wall that Dr. Land catch from U-2 spy plane. And it's a copy camera, basically. Person is this distance from the lens, and then the lens is the same distance to the film plane. The film plane is kind of like this trapeze that goes from the ceiling to the floor. And what would result after an exposure on Polaroid would be an original Polaroid that would be 40 inches in width and almost 9 feet long with the chemical tails. So that is a giant camera and difficult to use. At f/45, half an inch depth of field. Wow. You have to focus your subject. So in other words, if Dwayne, is my subject. Okay, I'd be on radio to 2 people physically inside the camera, and my assistant would push a total light, hot light, in close to their eyes, as close as they could stand it. And then the people inside would be looking upside down at the inverted image and try to get the person shuffled into a spot where the catch lights in their eyes were the most crystalline, which meant that they were at their sharp point. So I'm telling the mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani, I'm saying, Mr. Mayor, could you move back 2 inches? Okay. And he was kind of a piece of wood at the time anyway, so he didn't move too much, thank God. And then we'd have to spool up the camera, and we had to work camera obscura. So it was about 35,000 watt seconds of light, wired into a Mamiya RZ Pro 2, which I had four-sided underneath the lens for the giant Polaroid. And so that was all wired in. The giant Polaroid had a cap that had no shutter. So you had to black the room out completely, pull the cap off the giant Polaroid, and make a frame with the RZ. The lights would go off, and I'd get a simultaneous dupe. I'd get a 6:7 transparency and a giant Polaroid at the exact same instant. And the hard part was that in the darkness, the camera had to be spooled up. It was a Black & Decker wet-dry vacuum that was the paper against the film plate. Just like, you know, on the old film cameras, you had a film plate that the film had to stay level against, even against. Same thing here. And it took about 30 seconds to spool all that up, and someone in the dark had to stand there, which I think actually accounted for why they looked the way they do, because at that point they just had to be themselves. It was just there. And they literally had to stand for their portrait, which harks back to the beginnings of photography, when people had to come in and sit there with a neck brace or something, you know. So some dude with flash power you know. Anyway, we did this project with this camera. Every Polaroid was $300 a sheet. So after the folks at the Polaroid camera said they would stick with me and do it, and I told them it's going to be hard, they said they would do it. So I went to I had a 25-year history with Time Warner. I went directly to the head of Time Warner, John Huey, and I asked him for $100 grand. Sometimes in this business you have to be a little ballsy, but you also have to have faith that you can do this. And I'll never forget, John's from Atlanta. He's an old-time newspaper guy. He's one of those southern newspaper men who's smart as a whip, and he kind of looks at you sideways, lets you babble, and then gives you a decision. And he said yes. I asked him for it on Thursday. He gave me $100,000 on Monday, or the green light for it. And the last thing he said to me in his beautiful southern drawl, he looked at me and said, "Joe, you spend $25,000 and get me no pictures. That's okay. If you spend $100,000 and get me no pictures, we got a problem." Well, you spend 25 grand just walking into the giant Polaroid camera, sort of, you know, because the place is $2,000 a day and $300 a sheet. So you start the clock ticking on that really fast. So the only time I had an experience with the Polaroid camera, I photographed a ballerina. So all I had to show the New York Fire Department was a 9-foot print of a ballerina. So I went over to the closest firehouse, which was Ladder 9 on Jones Street. And FYI, because those guys came to the giant Polaroid first, I've been at that firehouse every 9/11 morning since then. Because that firehouse lost 13 guys. And I spend every morning, I'm not a firefighter, I just stand in the back just to pay my respects. And I know the guys appreciate that, because lots of people took pictures at the time, and I think that's incumbent on us too, as photographers, to maintain that relationship, you know, if it's a powerful one. So I threw this ballerina portrait on the floor, and I said, "What do you think, guys?" They were like, "What the fuck?" You know? And but sure enough, like 2 hours later, there was a rap of the Halligan on the door, and the whole fire truck had come around. I said, "This is where you're taking those big pictures?" And I had to get them in and out. I had to turn around a fire truck right away. So it was great because I had to work the camera really hard and really fast, and I can only make one exposure per person. Okay. Every once in a while I'd go to 2. A couple of times I went to 3, and only once during the whole thing I went to 4. And that four Polaroid effort involved a young firefighter, and Jason Cascone, whose very first day of work was 9/11. Probationary firefighter. He was given last rites and put on a bus and sent to the pit. And he still went to work. He's a lieutenant now in the Bronx. So, and he was so bug-eyed, it took me 4 Polaroids to make. Anyway, this thing came about, and it toured, made 7 stops, became a book, and it helped raise a little over $2 million, which was donated for the relief of downtown public education. At the second iteration of the show in New York, we sold, in 3 weeks, we sold $40,000 worth of books, and every dime of that went to the downtown PTAs. So it had impact, which was great. The hard thing for me was I didn't take any fees during the course of shooting it. And when it opened in Grand Central Station in Vanderbilt Hall, Rudy Giuliani hailed me as a hero of New York. Great. What he didn't know was I was $330,000 in debt. High interest credit card debt. I'd run the studio into the ground. I had gone through a divorce and I was living in my studio, which had no heat at night and no running water. So I would get up early every morning and go down the hallway and take a slop shower in the public bathroom before people started filling into the building. And that was 9/11 for me. I lived at the studio, at the Giant Polaroid studio. I slept in a bed over the Giant Polaroid because I couldn't stray from the Giant Polaroid because we were taking crews from the pit at 2 a.m., 9 a.m., 3 p.m. We made a guarantee. You show up, we'll photograph you. So I didn't leave the Giant Polaroid and 3 blocks of that area for 3.5 weeks. But it was an upgrade. This place had a shower. And now, 10 years later, I've got 24,000 pounds of photography sitting in climate-controlled storage in New Jersey. Because each frame, each piece, and there's 89 of them, is over 300 pounds. So here's the best thing I've ever heard about being a freelance photographer. Talk about keeping your feet on the ground. At the 5th anniversary, I couldn't get corporate money to display the stuff at all. And we wanted to put the stuff in the Firefighters Museum. So I donated $5,000 of my own money. And then I shamed I'm ashamed to admit this, I have a relationship with Getty Pictures. It's a very halting, grudging relationship. They handle some of my stock. I shamed Getty Pictures into giving us $10,000. I wrote 3 letters to Getty. I finally wrote to the asshole who used to run the place. And I said, just be ashamed of yourself. How much money have you made from the events of 9/11? And I got $10,000. And we had $15,000 we threw into a pot. We couldn't afford a forklift. We couldn't afford anything. Shifts of firefighters came in. Louis Caccioli, who was the cover of the book, organized shifts of firefighters. And they started pulling and hauling on these 2-ton crates. We had 10, 11 guys per shift, just pushing and shoving and hauling and everything like that. So I'm in there with them, and I'm trying to push the crate, and Keith Johnson from Ladder 6 looks at me and goes, he gives me a cross arm across the chest and goes, Joe, stay away from the crates. We're firefighters. We got lifetime disability. What if you throw your back out? He goes, what's going to happen to you? Joe, you're a freelance photographer. Nobody gives a shit about you. And Keith is my friend.
That's why you can say that.
But the evolution of that is, here's the photo community at work. I couldn't get squat to help me out. Storing that stuff, it just about killed me. Okay, but I was determined to hang out to it for lots of reasons. One of the principal ones is I have an emotional relationship with people who are in those boxes. And Adorama, that's why I have them on my blog. I went to the Powers That Be at Adorama with Jeff Snyder, and these 2 fellas in a battered conference room over a New York City photo shop looked at me and said, this is a good thing. We're going to help you with it. And the bill for the storage goes to them every month. And in turn, I donate a giant Polaroid in their name to the Memorial Museum, which has issued a letter of intent to acquire. But there's been no funds raised for it. So they get that bill every month, and every year I give a Polaroid in their name. That's the photo community at work. And I'm just very proud to be a member of it. So it's cool.
So, I mean, the big takeaway, for me is, how much you're willing to sacrifice. Photography will take everything from you. It'll take it all. It'll take your money. It'll take your family. It'll take your kids. It'll take your credit. For some people, we know it's taking their lives. Photography. We're all here because we love the picture. We love the cameras. We love the gear. We love to talk. And it's easy to look up to you, Joe. It's easy to look up to you.
that you're real with things, that you're honest. You know, back to looking, you can go, shit. Maybe 10 years ago, you were $300,000 in debt. You're living in your studio. You're blowing out a marriage. You're living the life that I live. And I'm blowing out a marriage.
Oh, no, you're not.
But I've been there. And you know, I'm sitting here in Atlanta and trying to keep it together, trying to just hold on to it. And I look at you, okay, you're way up there. I'm down here. And your honesty and your transparency has meant so much to me because it gives me hope. You know?
There's no difference among any of us here in this room. We love what we do. Anybody who loves what you do has some bumps in the road. Because it's not necessarily about logic, it's about passion. I always tell my students, this ain't a logical thing to do. It'd be much more logical to go work for somebody and go to an office and have that kind of life. Have a weekend off. Be much more logical. But the celebratory thing, here's the thing, again, it's something I say, we're Sisyphus. We'll never get the rock to the top of the hill, but man, is it fun pushing it. That's the best part. That's the best part, you know. So,
well, thank you.
Thank you guys. Thank you. It's been fun. I think everybody's going to go back to school now. It's like, fuck this.